Hi everybody, welcome back to First Friday Fives here on Go Big Boy or Go Home. I'm your host Sean, and some cartridges get it right on the first try through their design process. Others not so much, and they never make it past the initial test phase. Other cartridges still get designed, semi-certified, get a push out into the world, and then they fade off into obscurity. But today we're going to be talking about something interesting. Cartridges that needed a little tweak before they were actually viable. Cartridges that can confidently say,
"We all began as something else."
Okay, that was weird. Moving along, here are the top 5 big bore cartridges that all began life as a different cartridge.
Number 5. The 40 Super. Now this is a cartridge that has never taken off. Seriously, every time I tell someone about it, they think I'm pulling their leg. In early 1996, Fernando Coelho of the Triton Cartridge Company, now defunct, and bullet designer Tom Brzezinski had the idea to make a more potent 40 caliber cartridge based on necking down the 45 Super cartridge. But was that the first of its kind? Sometime in the late 1980s, a gunwriter named Charles Petty had been taking 45 ACP cases and necking them down to a 40 caliber using 10mm reloading dies. The resulting cartridge he named the 10mm Centaur, as Centaur Systems, now long gone, made the barrels for it. And when Coelho and Brzezinski started developing their cartridge, they hired Charles Petty and Tony Ramore, who went on to form Tromix, to assist in its creation. The new cartridge was not identical to the 10mm Centaur, as it had a shorter neck and had a casing that was 25mm long versus the Centaur's 22mm. But the concept was very much the same. They learned very quickly that the 45 Super brass wasn't strong enough and started testing with the 45 Winchester Magnum as a parent case. They made some changes to add strength and settled on 37,000 psi to mimic the pressure of the 10mm, and the performance they created was awesome. The new cartridge could launch a 135 grain bullet at 1800 feet per second, and with 200 grain bullets, you would see a gain of 150 to 200 feet per second over the 10mm performance. Definitely a step up. Triton decided to pitch the new cartridge to Sig Sauer. Sig had introduced a power-increasing bottleneck cartridge in 1994. They took a 40 Smith & Wesson case and necked it down to 9mm, which became the 357 Sig. So why not add this bottlenecked bruiser to the lineup and call it the 40 Sig? Spoiler alert, Sig didn't go for it. So it became the 40 Super. The cartridge has typically been used in conversion kits, mostly for the 1911 and the Glock 21. And while it has never become a hit, brass is available, as are reloading dies, and you can buy factory ammo at the time of this video from both Double Tap and Underwood. The 40 Super is a powerful wildcat that has carved out a niche for itself. But just remember, it really all began with the 10mm Centaur. Number 4. The 429 Desert Eagle. The newest cartridge on this list was designed in 2018, but it definitely is not the first of its kind.
Something very familiar about all this.
Back in 1997 and 1998, Peter Pye of cor-bon had the idea to neck down a 50 Action Express casing to seat a 44 Magnum bullet and increase the velocity to equal or surpass the 445 Super Mag. And the results were impressive, with a 240 grain bullet generating a reported 1800 feet per second. That's incredible! And that cartridge was the 440 cor-bon. MRI sold a number of barrels for the Desert Eagle chambered in 440 cor-bon, and some Desert Eagles were reportedly sold as 440 cor-bons directly from the factory. Hell, even the previously mentioned Tony Ramore made some AR-15 uppers in 440 cor-bon at his company Tromix between 1999 and 2004. Which brings us to the million-dollar question: why isn't the 440 cor-bon still being produced for the Desert Eagle? Well, if you've watched our videos, then you probably already know the answer. The 440 cor-bon did exhibit fantastic performance when you could get it to work. The bullets would sometimes work loose, either setting back into the case or jumping the crimp, but the biggest hurdle by far was an inconsistent shoulder on the brass case that killed reliable chambering. Imagine you pull the trigger and send a bullet down range, but then the next round jams, and no matter what, that round would never chamber. Big bore cartridges that are rare typically cost something like $1.75 or more per round. How pissed off would you be if you had 5 rounds in a box of 20 that you couldn't fire? The round died a quick death like my love of Star Wars after The Last Jedi. Like many good ideas, sometimes the devil is in the details, and it is possible to find that devil. Enter Jim Tertine of Magnum Research Incorporated. The man tirelessly worked to get this cartridge right. He found the chambering issue could be fixed with a consistent 30-degree shoulder, and a longer neck solved the problem of the bullets not staying set in the case. The result was the .429 Desert Eagle, named for the diameter of the .44 Magnum bullet and the pistol it was designed for. There are two loadings out for it right now, a 240 grain jacketed soft point at 1,625 feet per second, and a 210 grain jacketed hollow point at 1,750 feet per second. While it may not be as quick as the 440 cor-bon was, this is still a big jump from the .44 Magnum rounds that the Desert Eagle platform prefers, and is on par with some of the .445 Super Mag loadings. And it definitely exceeds most .44 Magnum loads in revolvers too. Given more testing and the fact that the round is currently being tested for SAMI certification at the time of this video, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more loadings down the road that may keep pace with the unreliable 440 cor-bon. When it comes down to it, the 440 cor-bon was a great idea that just couldn't work out the bugs. But, so far, with the .429 Desert Eagle, things are looking bug-free. Number 3. The 45 Super. Boy, this is shaping up to be a super list, isn't it, huh? Oh, bite me. The idea for the 45 Super is a sound one. Like many cartridges that have never gone away, like the 38 Special, the 45 Colt, and the 44 Special, the 45 Auto is a solid round that was designed when a lot of technology that is widely available today wasn't even a dream for gunmakers. Well, except for maybe His Holiness St. Browning. And when Dean Grinnell developed the 45 Super in 1988, the idea was to update the performance of the old classic. But as the story goes with this list, the idea to have a more powerful version of the 45 Auto was not new. In 1982, Detonics, a now-gone firearms manufacturer, released a gun chambered in a new cartridge known as the 451 Detonics Magnum. Based on a shorter version of the 45 Winchester Magnum, the 451 Detonics was slightly longer than your standard 45 Auto at .942 inches. This was a difference of 0.044 inches or 1.1 millimeters over the 45 Auto's .898 inches. This kept folks from chambering the round in a standard 45 Auto, which would have been very dangerous. The 451 shot a 185 grain bullet at 1,350 feet per second and a 200 grain bullet at 1,290 feet per second. Now that was the top end, and more often than not, the numbers were closer to 1,300 feet per second and 1,200 feet per second respectively. In 1987, Detonics went bankrupt, and while a second iteration tried to move forward, it too disappeared in the early 1990s. But the idea of a short 45 caliber Magnum autoloader didn't. In 1988, Dean Grinnell was experimenting with hot-loading the 45 Auto cartridge by cutting down the 451 Detonics Magnum cases. He beefed up 1911s with the assistance of gunsmith Ace Hinman to make them strong enough for this round. The result was the 45 Super. The new cartridge had plenty of punch with 185 grain bullets at 1,300 feet per second, 200 grain bullets at 1,200 feet per second, and 230 grain bullets at 1,100 feet per second. The main difference was that the case length was the same as a 45 Auto, so with very careful modification, a standard 45 Auto pistol could chamber and shoot it. A quick warning, if you want to shoot the 45 Super, please seek the assistance of a professional gunsmith. Stock guns typically will not be strong enough for the 45 Super, and you need to modify them to be safe. The 45 Super still has ammo produced and brass available, and reloading can be done with the standard 45 Auto dies you get pretty much anywhere. But as cool as the 45 Super is, the father of this little powerhouse is the 451 Detonics Magnum. Number 2. The 480 Ruger. What do you do when you want more power than a 44 Magnum can offer? Some would say go to the 45 Colt and hot-load it in a 5-shot revolver with an oversized cylinder to handle the extra power. But that really only provides heavier bullets and not much change in muzzle energy. So now what? The next step up is the 454 Casull, and it's an absolute recoil beast. That was the problem Ruger and Hornady wanted to solve when they started working on a new cartridge. They wanted to provide handgun hunters with more power than a 44 Magnum but less recoil than the 454 Casull. And the cartridge they turned to was the 475 Linebaugh. The 475 Linebaugh cartridge was designed by John Linebaugh, naturally, and was .476-inch bullets seated in a 1.4-inch straight-walled brass case with a maximum pressure of 50,000 psi. What the two companies noticed was that people were loading this round to slower velocities and were still effective at hunting while being easier on the shooter. This gave them an idea. Why not make a 475 Linebaugh light, if you will? The large diameter heavy bullets were the real workhorse here, and lower pressures with less powder would reduce recoil. In 2003, Ruger and Hornady introduced their new cartridge to the world. The 480 Ruger was chambered in the Ruger Super Red Hawk. The cartridge had been shortened by having the brass case chopped to 1.285 inches and having the pressure lowered to 48,000 psi. The first loading that was SAMI certified was a 325 grain Hornady XTP mag jacketed hollow point with a velocity of 1,350 feet per second. The general market didn't get the 480 Ruger at first. Most people were starstruck by the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum that had just been released the same year. The whole bigger is better thing. But the handgun hunters, they got it right away. I once had a hunter tell me that he would never have bought a 475 line ball if he had known about the 480 Ruger. For many hunters, this was a Goldilocks hunting round. Lots of power and manageable recoil made big game hunting more pleasant. And while it was discontinued for a while, demand brought it back in 2013 and it's still going strong. There's no telling if Ruger and Hornady would have had success in designing a powerhouse handgun hunting round with manageable recoil if they didn't have the 475 line ball to work from. But thankfully they did, and they gave us the 480 Ruger. Number 1. Drum roll please. The 40 Smith & Wesson. That's right, this all-too-familiar cartridge was inspired by a cartridge that missed its mark. The cartridge in question? The 10mm Auto. The 10mm Auto was designed in 1983 by Jeff Cooper and had a 25mm long straight-walled brass case and used a .400-inch bullet with a max pressure of 37,000 psi. And despite being 10.16mm, it was dubbed the 10mm Auto and could shoot a 200 grain bullet at 1,200 feet per second. That's some serious performance. After the infamous 1986 FBI Miami shootout, the FBI lost some of their faith in both the .38 Special Plus P and 9mm. They needed a replacement that had more power to effectively end shootouts quicker. They started testing new rounds in 1988, and one of the FBI agents there offered his Colt Delta Elite chambered in the 10mm. The 10mm became the winner, and in 1990 the FBI took delivery of the Smith & Wesson 1076. Problem solved. Not quite. Despite the excellent testing results, the 10mm was producing intense recoil that most agents had trouble with. There were also reports of the guns having excessive wear due to the intense pressure and high velocity. Overpenetration was also a factor. So how did these issues not come up in testing? Well, the initial tests weren't done with factory ammo. The agent who lent his gun also lent them some of his hand loads for testing, and they were reduced in output by a good 25%, shooting a 180 grain bullet at 950 feet per second.
Are you serious?
Your tax dollars at work, ladies and gentlemen. So after trying lighter loads that didn't cycle well in pistols designed for full power 10mm, Smith & Wesson came up with what might be one of the smartest marketing decisions in the history of the firearms industry. They took all of the complaints the FBI had about the 10mm and asked their R&D department to solve them with a new cartridge. The pistols were big, bulky, and heavy, the recoil was too strong and the muzzle energy a bit too hot, and that high pressure was causing a lot of wear and tear on the pistols. The solution was shortening the 10mm casing to 22mm and dropping the pressure to a max of 35,000 psi like the 9mm. The resulting 40 caliber cartridge would shoot a 180 grain bullet between 950 and 1,010 feet per second, that same sweet spot that the 10mm hand loads had been performing at. The 40 Smith & Wesson was officially on the map, and not only did the recoil drop substantially while providing the desired performance, but the overall cartridge matched the 9mm, allowing it to be chambered in pistols that were the same size as a 9mm pistol.
Brilliant!
The 40 Smith & Wesson has gone out of favor with law enforcement in recent years due to the updated 9mm ammo, less recoil with that cartridge, and every government entity's main concern, cost. Let's face it, 9mm is cheaper and puts less wear and tear on the gun, meaning longer service life and fewer repairs. But the 40 Smith & Wesson does what it was designed to do perfectly, and it wouldn't have been invented without the 10mm Auto being more than the FBI bargained for.
Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the list. Maybe this will make you too ask if your favorite cartridge could say,
We all began with something else.
Okay, seriously, what the hell is up with that? Are there any cartridges you think should have been on the list that we missed? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more Big Bore content. If you didn't like the video, thanks for giving us a chance, it's really appreciated. And remember, go Big Bore or go home.